My name is Danielle O'Donovan, and I'm an architectural historian who specialises in the late medieval and Tudor period. And I'm delighted to come and speak to you about this fireplace in the Crawford Gallery, which is a rare survivor of the late Middle Ages in Cork City. So this fireplace was brought to the Crawford in 1919, and it comes from Triskel Christ Church, which was also known as Holy Trinity, just to really confuse things. Now, it didn't come from the church itself. It came from a college that sat next door, interestingly known as Trinity College. The college was founded by the rector of the church, Philip Gould, in 1482. And it wasn't a college in the educational sense, it was a college of canons, a chantry college. Philip will have set up a chantry chapel inside the church, and he would have hired canons or clergymen to live in the college, go into the church every day, into his private chapel, and say masses for his soul and the souls of all of his family. Because at the time, it was believed that the more masses and prayers that were said for you, it would shorten your time in purgatory and speed your path toward heaven. Now, this fireplace dates from after the Reformation, when most chantry colleges were closed. But we know that this college may have gone on for some time, and it may have changed function. So the canons may have become secular clergy and stayed on living in the college. We know it's mentioned in 1578, and this fireplace dates from 1585. So I'd like to think about this fireplace as a piece of architecture. It's a very beautiful piece of late medieval architecture. We can see here it has very finely carved limestone details. We have chamfers, which mean the corner of the stone has been sliced away, and then these very lovely half pyramids that convert this cutaway corner back into a square again, and they're known as chamfer stops. And we have these on each corners of the two pillars of the fireplace. It's a large piece of architectural furniture with this very heavy mantelpiece, beautifully carved. So this is a dark carboniferous limestone, and it holds detail very, very well. It's hard to carve, but once the carvings are there, they remain for a long time. And so these architectural mouldings, as we call them, are still very crisp. Now, it's a Tudor era piece of furniture, and the Tudors started to flatten off arches. Often fireplace would have an arch, but they flattened them off, and this one's almost like an entirely flat arch. Actually, it's a lintel. It's a flat piece of stone that runs along between these two uprights. This beautiful fireplace is actually quite unusual. There are lots of examples of late medieval carving around Ireland, fewer in Cork, but this fireplace shows the influence of a pattern book, of a book that's been created to create examples of different decorations, whether they be foliage or more stylized decorations. And almost we have the pages of a pattern book laid out in front of us here in the lintel section of this fireplace. And the decoration is quite different from other late medieval fireplaces, even here in the city. So there's a fireplace that comes from Skiddy's Castle and has the date 1597, and you can have a look out for that. It's in North Main Street, mounted high up on the wall. And the foliate decoration of that fireplace is very much Irish late medieval, whereas here we're looking closer to something that has strong English influences and almost a little hint of the Renaissance. The fireplace has two really beautiful human figures, and they are very stylishly dressed. These gentlemen are wearing really up-to-date Elizabethan fashions. So you can see this gentleman here is wearing something called a doublet. It's a little jerkin jacket with puffed sleeves that have been slashed. And so a doublet is generally made of a stiff fabric, like a velvet or a leather. And then slits are made in it, and almost like a boxed pleat of other fabric is laid and sewn underneath. And that fabric is generally in a beautiful kind of silk, and it's a really bright colour, so that when you move, the slashes open up to reveal the really luxurious fabric below. And so he has a kind of a padded and slashed doublet, a beautiful neck ruff, and a very stylish pair of kind of padded hose, which is the Tudor word for trousers. He also has a sword. He's blowing or sounding a trumpet, which has its own flag decorated with a cross. And he also has a very stylish hat. Now, when we think of hats from the Tudor period, we kind of think of like a pork pie hat, a flat hat that sits on the head, as we see King Henry VIII wearing, maybe with a small feather. But in the Elizabethan period, when this fireplace dates from, taller hats come into fashion. And you can see he's wearing quite a tall hat with an amazingly jaunty feather. The fireplace also has quite strong political messages. There's an inscription running along the bottom of the lintel that says, "Glory and honour to God alone." It's from Timothy, and it actually is used a lot by Protestant reformers. So this fireplace is clearly declaring its Protestantism. Also, you'll see here something that I think you will recognise. They're Tudor badges, the Tudor rose. And Tudor rose is developed by Henry VII because he brings together the two warring parties of the Wars of the Roses, the House of York and the House of Lancaster. And if this fireplace did have any paint left on it, the outer leaves would be red and the inner leaves would be white. It's a little confusing because this rose has 6 petals where Tudor roses usually have 5, but the way in which the petals dip inwards is so characteristic of Tudor roses. I really do think this is a clear symbol of loyalty and respect for the Tudor monarchy.